Kneel Before Blog presents Kneel Before Pod.
Hello and welcome to Kneel Before Pod interviews. I'm your host Craig, and I recently had the pleasure of talking to Butch Lukic, supervising producer on the latest DC animated movie Legion of Superheroes. The conversation covers his responsibilities, loving the DC universe, and making use of the wide array of characters. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hi Butch.
Hi Craig, how are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
First question is, you've been producing animated films and shows for a really long time now, so what exactly does that role of supervising producer involve?
Well, it's pretty much the way you guys think of what Bruce Timm does. I start out from the script, get into the design end, go into storyboarding with the director, go through the animatic, get everything edited, send it, ship it, animated, do all the color, the backgrounds, painting, then post when everything comes back, re-edit things, tighten it up, reanimate stuff. Then we get into the music end. I work with the composer. And also in between that, also the actors, we do all the voice recording. And then on the back end, we do the ADR dialogue where we add dialogue or sweeten some of the dialogue that we recorded. And then we finalize, I do with putting everything together with the mixer, sound effects, music, voice alterations, things like that. And then we finalize the final film with an online where we check for screw-ups or other things that we didn't catch. And that's when we put it on the shelf and it sits there for a year until it finally gets out on home video.
So it's up to you to make sure all the various elements come together in a cohesive final thing.
Yeah, I'm the only one that's on the project full-time throughout the whole project. Writers come in the beginning, but they're not needed after that. And the director, after he's done with what he directs on the storyboard end, then he can come in with me later in the animation on editing. But in between that, we've already started another film, so he's kind of heavy in the boards working that stuff out. And I'm also back and forth working on this film or the film we just started out, whatever part we're doing, design or painting, things like that. So I'm on this project, I'm on other Blu-rays at the same time.
I bet you have to keep comprehensive notes to make sure that you're thinking about the right thing when you're working on something.
Actually, most of the time, you just keep it in your head and remember. But by doing this for so many years, like you said, your brain's kind of fixed to knowing, okay, I need this, I need that. I'm constantly texting when I'm seeing stuff or fixing things. So it's a constant back and forth and flow of moving things along, pulling things back, redoing things. It's just kind of the nature of doing it for so long. It's almost second nature, I guess.
And how involved are you in the scripting stage of it? When the writer gets the mandate to write the script, what sort of feedback will you give? Will you see different drafts and say, we'd like a bit more of this or a bit less of this, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we initially start out with the script writer telling them what the storyline, what we're looking for, what we're facing this continuity to be. So he or she goes back and writes the spec, and then we flesh it out from there. Certain things get kept, some things get added. We go through 2 or 3 drafts, sometimes 4, of rewrites. But with this one, Josie did pretty well from the first draft. I thought it was pretty solid.
I spoke to her recently. She seemed to be well on board with the project she was doing and super knowledgeable about everything involved in it.
Yeah, I think she took more time as far as figuring out what the characters we were going to use, plus as far as the Legion, and then also creating the whole background of the villains they have to face. She came up with that also. So, yeah, she pretty much did her research. So, thankfully, I didn't have to, or Jim.
And you've worked on so many DC projects. Is the DC universe a personal favourite of yours, or is it just somewhere you've sort of ended up?
I bought DC Comics since I was probably 5 years old. So, I started reading DC way back, with Batman and things like that. But then New Gods, Kirby first started those comics, and I followed through on that because obviously, I like Kirby's work from when he was in Marvel, and when he switched over, I bought everything he did. But in general, I carried on into the 80s. I preferred the DC comics to the Marvel stuff back then, because I thought they were doing older stuff than what Marvel was at the time. I thought Marvel was a little too generic. DC at least was trying new things like Watchmen and Dark Knight. and other things thrown in.
And DC seem to be a bit more flexible in terms of continuity, as in you can just drop a story and start a new one and it doesn't have to be connected to that previous one. That must be certainly really appealing for these Blu-ray releases that are coming out.
Yeah. I mean, for us, we are stuck on a continuity from where we started to where we're going to take this. So ours isn't that loose. We always had a plan and an idea of where these characters and most of the storyline was going to end up. It's just when we got to this story with Legion, we knew we needed Supergirl. We needed the Legion of superheroes. But what was going to be the story approach? We had to hook it up with a couple of other things that we did previously.
Yeah, you can see the tapestry sort of starting to come together. And I've noticed that these more recent films have dug into, well, for what a lot of people will be the more obscure corners of the DC universe. Having that freedom to just adapt these characters, some of them for the first time, must be amazing.
Yeah, that was always our intention, was to bring in as many as we could from the DC universe to build it up. We do have a few others coming to build up the universe, and beyond that, I think we'll be down to the final 2 or 3 films, and that'll expand the universe at that point too. But yeah, it's nice to be able to do characters that either people haven't seen in 20 years or they've never actually been done. I mean, a lot of these characters have been in a half-hour episode of Justice League Unlimited, but at least we get to put it more in a cinematic vein.
1 or 2 of them in live action as well with the CW TV shows.
Yeah, right.
There's all sorts of chances to see these characters. It's great stuff. In terms of this film, what for you were some of the highlights in terms of sequences and what you really wanted to get on screen for the Legion?
That whole beginning with the Krypton destruction and our mom, Allura, and Kara escaping, not her mom, that was a really strong sequence I wanted to see. And then there's the later sequences with a certain character that I can't mention who's behind all of this as far as what's going on that I really wanted to key in on, and some of the fun parts of the Legion where it's more like an 80s teenage flick where they're bantering back and forth. A lot of that stuff I enjoyed.
Yeah, I got that vibe from it. A little bit of a cheeky tone in places. I really liked that. I thought that really suited those characters.
Yeah, that's kind of what we felt this would feel more like. The way Josie was writing it, this kind of harkens back to a lot of those type of films.
So, kind of as a last question, what characters or stories would you like to be involved in? I don't know if any of them are coming up, or is there any in your bucket list that you really need to or really want to get done?
Yeah, what's coming up? The characters are in my bucket list, so I guess you'll have to wait till that one shows up. I think that's coming out in June or July.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. It was great speaking to you and getting a sense of how the process of stitching all this together works. It can't be easy and really comes across on screen how much work gets put into it. So well done. I hope the film goes really well and I hope future films go really well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your time. That was my interview with Butch Lukic. I wish him the very best for the film and all future projects. If you like what you heard, then do hit subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your podcasts. We'd love it if you would leave us a 5-star rating and a review. If you want to discuss this interview, DC in general, or anything else, then you can contact us on Twitter or Facebook under Neil Before Blog, or leave a comment on neilbeforeblog.co.uk. For more interviews, a monthly news podcast, and deep dive analytical discussions about your favourite nerdy things, join us on Neil Before Pod.